Well, good evening everybody, it's Zero back with another History Buff React video. Now this one is going to be the French Revolution by Oversimplified. Now I'm actually quite a big fan of Oversimplified. I haven't really looked at it from a history buff point of view, so this one should be interesting. I don't actually remember much about this one. I don't know if I watched much of this one actually. But it's a two-parter, so there'll be two videos on this. But it's by Oversimplified, and Oversimplified are just great anyway. So, without further ado, ow, let's get to it.
This video was made possible by NordVPN. Get protected by clicking the link below and get an amazing 75% off. That's only $2.99 per month with an additional month free for a limited time. Also, new French Revolution merch available now in the store, including King Louis and Marie Antoinette character pins, complete with detachable heads, just like the real thing.
That's slightly morbid.
So I said to the Marquis
like
de la Fufayette, "What do you think I am? Some dirty peasant? I've never worked a day in my life." Wow. That Marie
That's what it used to be
Antoinette
like, though.
Is pretty. Sure is. Wouldn't want to be Prince Louis.
All nobility used
That's
to be
gonna
like that.
A lot of responsibility when he becomes king, especially since France is in financial ruin. Quite. Thank you one and all for attending the royal marriage of my grandson, the future King of France, to the Archduchess of Austria. Now for the very awkward yet historically accurate part of the ceremony, where we all watch them get into bed together.
What? Wait, did that actually happen? Ugh, that's kind of creepy. That's really creepy. Actually, I'm not sure which one's creepier. The fact that they were doing that, or that statue in the background. I'm not sure if that's creepier or not. That's a bit weird. But even then, why would they watch them all get into bed together? That's weird.
Alright, now that's out of the way, let's leave the royal couple to it. You better give us an heir, you fat, ill-bred boy. Nighty-night. That's gonna be a lot of responsibility.
Oh,
France
God.
is in financial ruin.
He's thinking to himself.
You fat, ill-bred boy. Quite. That's gonna be a lot of responsibility. France is in financial ruin. That's gonna be a lot of responsibility. Oh, great. He's a freaking weirdo.
Oh.
France, the
Here we
most
go.
prosperous, cultured, and beautiful nation in the world, as it had been for centuries. An exquisite social culture, with the king and the upper classes throwing crazy parties every night, enjoying high living and fine dining. Who cares that they were only able to do so off the backs of the
Nice.
hard-working, starving poor? What are they gonna do? Revolt? They're only 80% of the population. No. Life in France is great.
Yeah, the proportion from peasants and, I was going to say serfs, they're not technically serfs. The peasants and the nobility in every country around this part was ridiculous. But France seemed to really take the piss when it came to actual equality. And these parties, I know a bit about these parties, I don't know very much, but they were extravagant. Especially when Marie Antoinette was involved. She's an interesting person. I wonder if they'll bring her up a little bit more in this video, but she was an interesting character.
What's that, France?
I'm really hoping they actually have the picture that I think they're going to have. I really hope they do.
You want to go to war with Britain and increase your power? Go for it, little buddy. You do you. And you'll...
Yeah, it doesn't go well.
Now you're in severe financial debt. We have no money.
Did not
What
go
do we
well.
do? Should we stop partying? Heck no. Party harder. That's okay. The peasantry will pick up the slack. They were created by God to do all the work, and you were created to reap all the benefits and party hard.
That's the way they
just how
thought.
society
That's the way they
works, and
thought.
we've all just accepted it for
Yep.
centuries. Why? Why what? Why do the nobility get to be all rich and stuff? Just because they were born into it? And the rest of us schmucks just have to accept that? Hell, why do we even need a king? Who decided that? It all just seems very unfair and unequal, and I, for one, am starting to question it.
I don't recognise that picture in the background
very
on the
enlightened
left.
of
I
you.
don't remember that one.
And so began the Age of Enlightenment. Great
This was an
philosophical
interesting-
thinkers across France and beyond began to question whether this beautiful nation was really all that beautiful.
Yeah, this was an interesting time period in Europe, actually. A lot of the nobility and a lot of the kings and queens in Europe started to not necessarily lose their power, but definitely started to come into question whether or not the monarchy was even necessary. And you'll see much further on, especially in like the next about 50 to 100 years after this, that most of the monarchs and royalty in Europe actually disappear for good. They lose their power and they either become constitutional monarchs, such as Britain. You know, the kings and queens of Britain are constitutional monarchs. They actually technically have no power. I think Sweden, or one of the Scandinavian countries, still has a king or queen as well. I don't remember which one, but they have no power at this point. Well, sorry, 100 years after, they have no power. Now, at this point, they have power. In 100 years, they start losing it.
After all, hey Prince Louis, bad news. Your grandpop died of smallpox this morning, which means good news, you're now the king. So just to sum up, France is in severe financial debt, and the angry populace are beginning to question how necessary you are. But hey, I believe in you.
That was going on all over Europe.
You got this. Maybe. Oh no! Prince Louis Capet became King Louis XVI in May 1774. He was a notoriously weak man, and he knew it. He barely had the wisdom to rule a nation, never mind one in crisis, and he was easily manipulated by those around him. One of his first acts was to try to get revenge on the British by financing their American colony's revolution. Hey, we're an independent nation now. That was real swell of you, Louis.
They might bring it up in the video, I don't know, but France basically bankrupted itself doing this. It was already going through financial troubles, but they spent a lot of money. Well, I say France, the monarch spent a lot of money, sent a lot of money to America in way of, you know, arms and troops. Well, maybe not troops, but training, especially weapons. And yeah, I mean, America became an independent nation out of it. But the aftermath wasn't so good.
Couldn't have done it without you. Glad I could help. So hey, about all that money we lent you, when can we get that back? Yep, you're a great guy. I'll never forget what you've done for us. Real glad I could help, friend, but about that money, gotta go now, chum. Best of luck to you. Oh, no.
Didn't pay back a penny.
France was in even more debt. France's poor, suffering under the strain of economic ruin, watched as the nobility continued to live as though nothing was wrong. In particular, they grew increasingly disdainful of the Queen, Marie Antoinette, as she continued to spend all of France's money on her own luxurious lifestyle and fashion, while the peasants were breaking their backs in the fields. She was walking around like, hey, my hair is about. I'm not making
Please, someone. Yes! There's the photo.
Really was a.
There's the photo I was wanting them to put in. This is ridiculous. Her hair genuinely looked like that at one point. It is absolutely ridiculous. Why? 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 I get it, the fact you want to look special, you want to look different, but why?
About. And her lavish spending earned her the nickname Madame Deficit. And speaking of the Queen,
I don't
there was
remember that
also
one.
a long-standing scandal around the fact that the King took a very long time to boink her, and the working classes of Paris began ridiculing the royal couple with lewd pamphlets depicting the Queen as a court
demonetized,
and the King as a wuss, unable to fulfill his marital duty. Respect for the monarchy was at an all-time low, as France's finances were spiraling out of control, and the King and his aides really only had one solution to the crisis: tax the poor, tax the poor. We could do a sexy calendar shoot. I mean,
why not?
Tax the poor. And so it was. The poor, who were already struggling to make ends meet, found themselves being taxed from every direction. Hey, I'm the royal tax collector. Looks like you've yet to pay your income tax, head tax. By the way, how many windows you got in that house of yours? 3? Oof, yep. There's gonna be a tax for that. Hey, your local priest.
Is that real?
Have you paid your church tithe yet? Well, at least this one is going to the good work of God.
That one I know is true.
Sure. God. I think this year, God wants me to buy a new swimming pool. Hey, private tax collector here. Oh, and I brought some goons with me. Just a few quick questions. How much salt did you buy this year? About 7 kilos, I think? Yep. Okay, there's gonna be a tax for that. Oh, what's that over there? And that's extra salt I held over from last year, so I wouldn't have to buy as much this year. Oh, yeah, there's a tax for that. And what are you doing with all this salt? Well, obviously cooking. On the table. Yep. And preserving fish and meat. Oh no. Yep. and there's a tax for that.
Were these taxes
how old
real?
is he?
So that's
He's
a bit
9.
ridiculous if it
And
was.
so he's purchased his required amount of salt for this year, right? What? No, he's 9. Uh-oh. Sorry, little Timmy. Looks like I'm gonna have to tax you for that.
Oh.
Yep. Salty. There's gonna be a tax for that. And that's not all. A huge portion of the peasants' harvest had to be given up. And there was also the labor tax, where peasants were required to work a certain number of days for their local lord without pay.
Yeah,
Obviously,
that caused a
people weren't
lot
too
of
happy
uproar
with
when
these
that
taxation
happened.
policies. And the aggressive nature of these private tax farmers sometimes even escalated to violence. In particular, though, the people really hated how inconsistent the taxation rules were across the nation, and also the fact that the first 2 estates often had to pay very little, if any tax at all. And so, the anger continued to grow. France had a population that was just about ready to explode. What could push them over the edge? How about a touch of natural disaster?
The famine?
A series of harsh summers and winters left the peasants' harvests in ruin, meaning they had no food or money, and the cost of bread skyrocketed. Of course, the upper classes had massive stocks of grain and wheat, so they were virtually untouched by this new crisis. But now the poor really were starving, and they began to riot. Women took to the streets. Bakeries were raided, and bakers suspected of keeping bread for themselves were sometimes even hanged. Wow, this is really getting out of control. Your Majesty, we need some decisive action. You need to step up and lead us. What will you do? Okay, I've got this. I know. I'll summon the Estates General, and they'll decide what to do. You really are a fat, ill-bred boy.
Yeah,
the Estates General was the closest thing France had to a government, apart from the king. It was a purely advisory body, and was rarely summoned. In fact, it hadn't been summoned for 175 years prior to this.
Okay, I didn't realize it was that long. I knew it was a long time period between the Estates Generals. I didn't realize it was 175 years. That's a long-ass time. But, yeah, I was saying, no, it's purely advisory, so it's kind of almost like, I suppose, if you want to relate it to something, especially in the UK, like, you know, I don't actually know how politics works in most European countries. I assume they're probably similar with the House of Commons. Imagine the House of Commons, but Queen Elizabeth is the only person with actual power. The MPs are just there to advise the Queen. That's what the Estates General was like. So the Estates General technically doesn't really have any power. Interesting system. Did work very well. It was summoned very rarely. Shows how useful it was, really, doesn't it?
But with France in a severe crisis, the king felt the time was right to call on the government to help.
So I think the camera's actually blocking part of the
bottom of the screen. Was made up of representatives from the 3 estates, that is, the clergy, the nobility, and everybody else. Okay, thanks for coming, everyone. The first order of business is regarding the clergy and nobility. You all get brand new Porsches. You get a Porsche, and you get a Porsche, and you
like
get a
911s
Porsche.
as well.
Everybody gets a Porsche.
Yay!
And now into the second order of business. France is completely out of money. Like, it's never been this bad before. Anyone got any ideas? How about we all get Lamborghinis next time? The king decided that in order to make a decision, they had to come up with a voting system. Okay, the clergy. You have a population of 130,000, so you'll get 1 vote. The nobility. You have a population of 350,000, so you'll also get 1 vote. And the third estate. You have a population of 27 million people and make up 98% of the population. Very impressive. You'll get 1 vote. The third estate were obviously pretty unhappy with this system because they kept on finding that this would happen. We propose to raise taxes on the third estate. All in favor? All opposed? 2 to 1. Taxes will be raised on the third estate. We propose a motion that says the first 2 estates are a bunch of poo-poo heads. All in favor? All opposed? 2 to 1. It's official. We are not poo-poo heads. The third estate realized that any attempt at reform would be outvoted by the 2 upper estates, and they thought that was kind of lame. So they decided that since they were 98% of the population, they could go off to form their own government, make their own laws, and take over the running of the country. And so, the National Assembly was born.
Yes,
the third estate was now in control, and there was nothing the king could do to stop. Ha! I've locked you all out of your building. What are you going to do about it? We'll probably go find a different building that isn't locked. Ow, no! The National Assembly did find another unlocked building, just down the road, an indoor tennis court. where on the 20th of June 1789, they all took
Tennis
the
court
tennis court oath, pledging to continue
what a
meeting
picture
until
that
the
is.
king finally gave into their
Such a good picture, though. Such a good picture.
demands for more equality and economic reform. This new National Assembly included many of the most educated members of the Third Estate, including two young lawyers by the names of Maximilien Robespierre and Georges Danton. Some members of the first two estates even joined their cause. Some of these men formed a radical new political party called the Jacobin Club and quickly became leading figures. While many members of the Third Estate simply wanted more equality, a growing number in this Jacobin faction would begin calling for something even crazier: the removal of the king entirely. And this is where fear began to take hold. With such a volatile situation developing, everyone was afraid of something. The king feared his position was under threat, and he called in the military to take position around Paris. The Third Estate heard rumor of the gathering military force, and they feared the king was planning to round them up and arrest them. Maybe he'd even execute them. It also didn't help that the king had just dismissed France's popular finance minister, who had been trying to make reforms himself. It seemed the king was done negotiating. Fear, left unchecked, often boils over into anger, and anger detonates with violence. The angry people of Paris, after centuries of cruel inequality, harsh oppression, even starvation, fearful of having their new movement for reform demolished so soon, decided that it was now or never to take action. Screw reform. They decided they'd do one better. How about revolution? The people of Paris, believing the French military
this is where it all explodes,
decided they should arm themselves. The National Assembly announced the creation of a bourgeois militia, the National Guard, and immediately many troops from the French military defected over to the revolutionary side. In the early hours of July 14th, 1789,
storming of the Bastille?
a large crowd stormed and raided the Hôtel des Invalides, a military hospital where they were able to secure a large number of rifles. The bad news was they weren't able to find any gunpowder for their new weapons. The good news was they knew exactly where to
is this
get
the Bastille?
some. A prison fortress and a symbol of royal tyranny towering over Paris, the Bastille. Mid-morning, the crowd gathered around the Bastille and demanded that the man in charge, Governor Delaunay, surrender the prison and hand over the gunpowder. Obviously, Governor Delaunay was like, no way. So he stalled for time by inviting a few members of the crowd in for negotiations. The crowd, still waiting outside, quickly became impatient, and before long, they stormed the fortress, taking on the French troops inside. Your Majesty, we've received word that the people have surrounded the Bastille. Governor Delaunay will hold them off. No need to worry. Actually, Your Majesty,
the storming of the Bastille was bloody. I think pretty much every single French loyalist soldier in the Bastille was killed. And I think they might be bringing it up here, I don't know, but they cut Governor Delaunay's head off and put it on a pike, I think. This is one of the first times they did it. It became one of their favourite things to do, eventually, I think, if I remember correctly.
Majesty, it appears the crowd is now headed away from the Bastille. You see? What did I tell you? Clearly Governor Delaunay has defeated them and has them on the run.
Nope.
No need to worry.
He didn't.
Your Majesty, isn't that Governor Delaunay's head on a pike? Well,
clearly there it is.
Governor Delaunay has taken on the form of a bodiless pike-head deity, and the people are so enamored with him, they're parading him around the city. No need to worry at all.
Not my problem. Not my problem. I've decided it's not my problem, therefore it's not my problem. Bloody hell.
The National Assembly heard about the violence that had taken place. They had two options. Either one, they denounce it and try to carry on the revolution using peaceful means, or two, they say, damn, you stuck his head on a pike? That's pretty hardcore. And we love it. Incidentally, they went with option number two.
Oh, yes.
Some historians believe this reaction paved the way for the utter violence and bloodshed that would become the legacy of the French Revolution. This widespread acceptance of violence during the Revolution is also largely credited to the writings of a certain Jean-Paul Marat.
Marat was mental. He's one of these sort of like intelligent people. He was very intelligent, Jean-Paul Marat. He was very, very intelligent. He was also not completely insane. He was a bit insane, and his writings probably did the most damage out of a lot of things. You know, you've got people on the streets, but they need something to lead. They need something to, you know, base their opinions off. And here comes Jean-Paul Marat.
A man of science with a horrible skin condition that kept him confined to a bathtub. He began writing a radical newspaper he affectionately named The Friend of the People.
I didn't know his name that. Okay.
Be very afraid. Given the chance, the king and the nobility won't hesitate to massacre us all. The solution is simple. Execute them. Kill every last one of them. Cut off 1,000 heads, and if that's not enough, cut off 1,000 more. Oh, hey, Mr. Squeaky. What are you doing down there? You're so cute. Aw, I love you too, Mr. Squeaky. Mwah. Now, where was I? Oh, yeah. Kill them all. It became one of the most popular publications in Paris during the Revolution and succeeded in spreading ever-increasing fear and anger among the people. In August, leaders of the National Assembly, with help from a certain Thomas Jefferson, adopted the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, an incredible document that guaranteed liberty and equal rights to all men. And when I say men, I mean men.
Yep,
Despite its glaring shortcomings in gender equality,
not women,
the
men.
massively influential declaration would go on to inspire the struggle for liberty and equality across the planet for centuries. However, back in France, the vast majority of...
It was interesting, actually, because many people think that this was... It basically goes from the American Revolution to the French Revolution, and then you also have the Latin American Revolutions, I believe, just after this, or at the same time, I can't remember which one. But they started splitting off from the Spanish Empire, becoming independent, things like that, and then you started getting smaller problems in the east of France, which they might pick up on. They probably will, actually, when they start going to war with the rest of Europe. But we'll see. We'll see where it gets up to.
The people weren't really so concerned with enlightened ideas of equality as much as they were concerned with the fact that they were still starving. Bread was still expensive as hell and hard to come by. The people felt that one reason nothing had been done yet about the crisis was because the king simply couldn't see the problem. He lived in Versailles, a full 20 kilometers southwest of Paris.
There's no problem if I can't see it. Prince Louis XIV. This happens quite a few times, actually, all throughout history. You don't realise there's even a problem because you're so far away from where the problem actually is. But bearing in mind, right, this is all happening in Paris. This isn't happening much anywhere else. This is mainly in Paris. The countryside, some of the countryside and some of the smaller towns, they never joined the revolution. Never bothered with it. They might pick up on that later as well, I'm not sure, but they didn't see the problem. Either they weren't taxed that much because local taxes and stuff like that were so low, or they just didn't see any need to have a revolution. It was an interesting time for France, that's for sure.
And as a result, lived in comfort, separated from his dirty, stinking subjects. On October 5th, a crowd of women, 7,000 strong, decided they'd do something unprecedented. They decided they'd remove that separation and confront the king directly. The women marched all the way to the king's palace in Versailles. Along the way, the crowd continued to grow into the tens of thousands. And when they arrived, they demanded an audience with the king. What are those things outside the palace? They're poor people, Your Majesty. That's poor people? They say they're hungry. Hungry? Then let them eat cake. Wow. See, this is the exact BS that led to this whole mess in the first place. Cake. You're so out of touch. They're writhing around in the filth, breaking their back to barely scrape by, and they come to you demanding just the basic ability to feed themselves, and you think a slice of cake will sort them out? Well, then let them eat Taco Bell Crunchwrap Supreme. Wow. They're not that desperate. Members of the crowd actually managed to break into the palace with the intention of killing the queen, who narrowly escaped through a secret passage in her bedroom. The enraged mob killed several members of the royal guard and raised their heads on pikes, which, if you haven't noticed yet, is something they were quite fond of doing.
Heads on pikes.
The king had no choice but to come out and talk to the crowd. He agreed to accept his new position, sharing power with the revolutionary government, and to return to Paris with the crowd, removing the separation between king and subject. King Louis had a problem with people constantly raiding his palace, but one thing he didn't have a problem with was people raiding his computer.
Yeah, segue.
Because he used NordVPN.
Oh dear. Oh, yeah, very interesting time in France. I didn't realise it was mainly women that started both of the main marches, actually. But yeah, interesting. Some of this I knew, some of this I didn't. So hopefully the next one's going to be a lot more interesting. I haven't really spoken an awful lot because they're kind of touching on everything. Well, this is the thing with Oversimplified. Their stuff is very well described and documented, very well researched. So I didn't really feel there was that much I could add on to this. But we'll see it in the second one, which we will do shortly. Also, as a quick little thing, I'm going to be moving most of my gaming stuff onto my Twitch. I'm probably going to temporarily stop doing gaming stuff on YouTube, mainly because it's YouTube's oversaturated with gaming videos, things like that. So I'm probably going to be moving all that to my Twitch. My Twitch link will be down below in the description. I stream twice a week, never any confirmed days, but just make sure that you followed so you know when I'm streaming. I'll be currently streaming SCP Secret Lab at the minute, but I'll be changing that up in due time. But for now, I have been Zero, this has been History Buff Reacts, and I will see you next time. Bye bye!